Hi.
Hi, beautiful.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
How are you?
I'm good.
I am ready for summer. I'll just say that.
I feel like my life is summer.
You know how like everyone was obsessed with the Real Housewives like openers?
Yes.
I feel like that would be like the perfect opener for you.
Because what you have to understand is I
Yeah.
came from England where every day
Yeah.
is winter, literally of the whole year apart from 2 weeks in June or something.
Yeah.
So, you know, my life is summer now.
Also, you went from England to Coachella and you're going to Mexico. Like you're on a travel bug right now.
And I was in Maldives before England.
Yeah.
April was really busy for me.
I wish I could come to Mexico with you. It's like all I want.
Still time.
I know.
Anyways, speaking of the weather and seasons, today we are speaking about mental health, which I think relates to the climate quite a lot.
It really does.
This is a question we've gotten, which is obviously something that no one doesn't not think about because it's a huge part of everyone's lives.
Yeah.
And just like our motherhood episode, I think we can get fairly vulnerable and kind of openly speak about our journeys with mental health and just in general the topic of what we think, you know, how society and culture deals with it. So it's one that I'm excited to answer.
I'm excited about it too. I think there are so many different facets to mental health. I also think we live in a time right now where we are talking about mental health now more than ever. I have like an interesting relationship with the chat about mental health because I do think sometimes it can be toxic and can be a crutch. I think like with social, sometimes like it's been amplified where everyone's just like mental health. And then sometimes there's too many resources to kind of go through. But I think just having said all of that, I'm also really grateful that we get to live in a time where it's not embarrassing now to talk about mental health, to talk about struggle, to talk about the different facets of like mental health that can be anything from like anxiety to OCD to like an eating disorder. I think that especially with men, my therapist was just like sharing with me that a lot of her clients are also men now, and like she's really seen like an uptick. And I also have a lot of male friends who have sought therapy. So I think for me, what an exciting time that we get to actually like explore all of the different parts of our brain, because I do think if you think about just being a human, like we're just dropped on this planet and then we're given overstimulation and told to perform. And then if you cry, you're considered weak. And it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, and no one gives us a playbook of how to deal with things. Yeah, and the reality is that the current statistic is that 1 in 8 people globally live with a mental health condition, with the most prevalent being anxiety and depression. So because of that, I like to think of mental health as the same as physical health, really. It's just a different part of our body, right? It's our brain. So I like to think of mental health as the same as just physical health. And there's been times in my life, which we'll delve into in this episode, where I really had to treat it like a physical disorder, and like go about it in the same ways as I would if I had a migraine or if I had, you know, an accident and I had to go to the hospital. So I'd like to start this by actually talking about something that isn't the most obvious, but I want to get your thoughts on it. Which is the glorification of hustle culture and burnout amongst young people. Do you think that, because as you put it, and as I've just put it, anxiety and depression are on the rise, and it seems like everyone online has anxiety and depression. And weirdly, it's not something that I think, you know, my elders are suffering with, or maybe they are and we just don't know, or they're just not talking about it like Gen Z are. But do you think that maybe as well with the advent of social media and the glorification of like hustle culture, that has, you know, exacerbated these disorders for people?
I think it definitely has. And something I often think of is like a quote that I saw the other day. And it's like something about like where you're at now is like where you always wish that you would be. I have always been a really anxious person, like ever since I was a little kid. Like,
so would you say you have anxiety?
100% have anxiety.
Okay.
And I am not like medically treated for my anxiety. But like I've always been super anxious. Like my mom would tell stories like when I was a kid, I'd like breathe into a paper bag like at camp, like if I got like stressed. And I have like something called vasovagal, which is like if you get really anxious, you lose oxygen to your brain and you like will pass out and like look like you're having a seizure. And I, again, am like not medically treated for that. But why I bring that up is being a very anxious person, I've worked a lot on myself to figure out how to live life every day, like feeling just naturally anxious. But I think in the world that we live in, that is so hustle centric. Also, as a woman, being fed the idea and the need that like to be valued, you have to be a boss bitch if you're not a mother. So because I'm not a mother and I'm not married, I feel like the identity that I took on is to be a hustler. And I think when you're anxious and you're a hustler and you feel like you can never reach the goal, because anytime I've reached a goal in my career, I'm never satiated and I just want the next one until the next one until the next one. And I think on social it really amplifies because you see all of these other people reaching their goals and doing these trips, or like, I mean, everyone's talking about it. It's not like I'm saying anything new, but I think the need to outperform never lets your body rest. And then you can never actually be alone with your thoughts because you're always wanting more.
Yeah, that's so interesting you say that, because I actually don't think of myself as much of a hustler, which I think to a lot of people, they think of me as that. But I'm actually like not that much of a like 24/7 always working. Like I'm very good at work-life balance. And it's something I'm very proud of, that like I really like live life and then I kind of fit the jobs in, right? But there's something to be said about that, which is to do that, I have to always be connected. I have to be 24/7 like online and, you know, make sure that my responsibilities are done so I can have that work-life balance. And because of that, even my wife always says, like, if I have an hour to myself without technology, without a laptop, without a phone, that's when I get anxiety, because my constant state of like calm is being connected, is being you know, fast at replying. It's just feeling like I have control. So when I am disconnected, I feel like I don't have control.
I relate to that really deeply because I have severe insomnia. And so I either am sleeping great or I'm sleeping like 2 to 3 hours a night. And when I have my really bad insomnia fits, it's because I'm so overstimulated that then when I finally lay down and I have the moment
Your
of
body
silence,
doesn't know what to do.
Yes.
I have that. I sleep great, but I have that if I'm forced, for example, massages, right? I struggle even having a massage because I'm disconnected for an hour. And it's almost like my brain doesn't know what to think about, because during the day I can use going on social media or going on my emails or working as an escape.
Yeah.
I mean, this is so unhealthy. Like, we should not be like that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to, I still don't really know how to meditate, but I'm trying to figure out a way that I can do activities that put me in a flow state, whether it's skiing or playing pickleball or activities where my brain is not on the go, but I'm also not going to the extreme of like sitting there with my thoughts and then completely like spiraling.
This is random, but I have a crush on someone right now and we've been hanging out. And when we like go on dates and hang out, sometimes we'll just like be at his place and just like sit on the couch and like music will be playing, but we don't necessarily have to be talking. And it's like my body will be so calm and it almost feels like meditative.
Wow.
Because it's like, wow, my nervous system's actually relaxing because I think I feel like in this like really safe environment. But I love that you said like activities of flow, because I do think if you are an anxious person, getting a massage might not be the key, but like your example of skiing could be.
Yeah, and one thing that I do that calms me down so much, which is so funny, and my wife definitely knows this about me, but something that really calms me down and contributes to a flow state for me is tidying. So it's almost like if my mind is all messy and chaotic inside, by doing something that's external organization, I feel controlled.
Yes. That is like
Do we sound insane?
Of my existence. Like, the biggest fight my stepdad and I have ever gotten into is because anytime I go to my mom's, I must reorganize the entire fridge and the pantry.
I love organizing.
Because I cannot help myself. And I'm very much into the organization in an OCD way.
Me too.
But it is, to me, it's like a retreat. I'm like, oh, vacation.
It's so fun. To me, it's so fun, which is so funny because I hate cleaning. Like, I'm not a cleaner. I hate cleaning. I hate the product, but I love tidying. I love organizing. I love making things tidy, even if it's in like a list making way, which is also contributes to my OCD. So here's the mental health disorders that Devon and I have. So just to put it out right in the open in the beginning of the episode, Devon has anxiety. I have OCD.
I must make a list to live.
Yes. I have ADHD. I think that's it for my... Wait, okay.
What?
This is a crazy story, and my friends and everyone close to me know this about me. So I do not suffer with anxiety. Like, I'm very lucky that I don't have anxiety and I don't have depression. Get those out of the way. But when I graduated university, so I remember vividly every single day of that year. It was 2017. I was 22 years old. And for whatever reason, that year, I had anxiety. And it all started when I was on a plane alone, going from Cairns in Australia to Singapore. And it was during the summer where I was studying abroad in Australia. I was having the best summer of my life. Mentally, I was so happy, having the most fun. And for my birthday, I had just gone scuba diving in Australia. And then the day after, or it wasn't even the day after, I think it had been like, I don't know, 16 hours after I went scuba diving, I got on a plane. And I remember taking off on the plane to Singapore thinking I shouldn't be on a plane after having scuba dived. And I don't know if that contributed to me having my first ever panic attack. But the next thing I know is I was having a panic attack. But here's the catch. Because I had never had a panic attack, I didn't know it was a panic attack.
Horrible.
So I thought I was dying from fucking
like
scuba diving.
Attack. Yeah.
I can't even explain the feelings I had. It was ears ringing, dry mouth. I looked pale as a ghost. I remember, you know when you have the seatbelt sign on?
Yeah.
We were literally taking off. I ignored it. I ran to the loo and I looked in the mirror and I said, this is how I die. Like, I'm like, I'm literally alone. I'm actually going to cry. It was like the worst time of my life.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm crying over anxiety. It was the worst time of my life because I was alone and I was like, this is how I go.
Yeah.
I feel like talking about it is like bringing the anxiety back. And I didn't know what was happening, right? And it was a 6-hour flight, and they were so kind. They like moved 3 people from their seats and they put me like lying down, and they were like, is anyone a doctor on this flight? And I think there was like a nurse and a doctor. They both came to me and they were like, why do you think you're having this? And I was like, I went scuba diving. And I think they were a little bit worried because you can genuinely die from the pressure difference. But they were like, how many hours was it? And I was like, it was like 16. And they were like, no, you should be fine. And they were trying so hard to figure out what was wrong with me. But I was like still alive. Like, I didn't die. So for 6 hours, I was alive, but like having this panic attack. So I got off the plane and I went to like the hospital in the Singapore airport, and they were like, oh, I think you just had a panic attack. And I was like, well, that's impossible because I don't have anxiety. And they were like, no, like this is a panic attack. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. And obviously, like, I Googled everything, and sure enough, I was like, okay, this was a panic attack. And I know that all I know is after that first panic attack, for that whole year, I had so many more. I would go to the hospital in London thinking I was dying, just like I did on that plane. I think I went to the hospital like 6 times in that year.
Because I can relate to understanding what that feels like. And I think it's like your body going into fight or flight because it's also fear-based.
Right. And
you're trying to regulate.
There was one day in specific that I remember. That's when I think things got really bad, where I was in London alone. I remember my boyfriend at the time wasn't with me. My parents were living in New York and I was just alone, and I went out shopping, and I remember, and I've only had this once, thank God, but it was the first and last time I ever had depersonalization, where you walk around and you don't feel like you're in your body, and you can kind of like see yourself from the outside, and you kind of just feel like a ghost floating around. And I couldn't get myself home. Like, I just sat on the tube. I remember like every single moment vividly, just thinking like, how do I get myself home? And I finally did, and I called my mom, just like, this is just horrendous, like I don't know what to do. And she was trying to help me. And I also think that depersonalization experience was probably also what depression feels like, because I was crying but didn't know why, and it was like this empty feeling. Like, it wasn't that I felt sad, I just didn't feel nothing at all. Thankfully, those symptoms, like, was literally only one day where I felt like depersonalization and depression. And after that, it was just anxiety again. And then after about a year of suffering with this, it never happened again.
Did you ever get medication?
I got diazepam for the panic attacks, and they definitely helped.
Yeah.
Which and this is why I'm very pro medicine, because I think in those moments when you feel like you're dying, I mean, I know people that could just breathe through that. They're stronger than me. I can't. I just feel like I'm dying, and I will pop a pill, and that will be. But it's never happened again. I was 20 or 22, I can't remember, and after about a year of having crazy anxiety, I've never ever had anxiety again. Maybe like, I mean, a small
in like micro moment.
Like not like sustained like that. Because another thing that happened was, through that year, I couldn't breathe as like, it sounded like a terrible year. So I had this.
This year is a fucked up year.
So I basically every day couldn't breathe. What I mean by that is, you know, when you like can take a deep breath, like there's like an end point of your breath, and then you breathe out. I could never reach that end point, so like I couldn't breathe. I couldn't take a deep breath like any of the days in that year.
Have you like looked back at that year, and do you think there was a catalyst to something that was going on in your life that maybe wasn't like hyper aware, but looking back could have been like a subtle thing? Because they do say sometimes it like is a pressure, like it builds up over time, like it doesn't necessarily need to be like one major moment.
So my mother thinks that, so my brother had just been born and I was living abroad, so like I wasn't with my brother. My life was obviously about to change in a crazy way, and I wasn't even like with them. My mom thinks it's like, oh, it's because you had a brother, like that's a huge life change. Another huge life change is that first panic attack that I had, I was traveling alone for 3 months in Southeast Asia and Australia. And I actually remember I was in this hostel room alone in like Vietnam. I think I was in Ho Chi Minh. And I do remember thinking, like, if something happens to me, no one knows where I am. Yeah. And like I could die and no one will know where I even am. They don't even know I'm in Vietnam. And I'd have thoughts like that. This was all prior to the first panic attack. And I don't know if that contributed to it, because I was like a young girl traveling alone. But I think what was weird about the anxiety was that it was all physical symptoms, which led me to think that something was wrong with me physically, that it wasn't mental. Yeah. And I'd keep going to doctors and I'd keep going to the hospital, and they'd be like, you're fine. We're doing all the tests. You don't have a heart condition. Like, you're perfectly healthy. And I'm like, no, like there's got to be something physically wrong with me, because I'm fucking happy. Like, I am so fucking calm. Like, I'm happy, but there's something wrong physically with me. Yeah. And they're like, no, like, I think you have anxiety. And I'm like, it just doesn't make sense. So because of how physical it was, my theory, truthfully, is one, it could have been the contraceptive pill, because I mean, I didn't start the pill around that age, but, you know, you just don't know how the pill could affect you. But the crazy thing is I'm still on that same pill now and I'm fine. So it might not have been, but I think that's a theory. Another theory is just like a massive come down from all the substances at uni. Like just 4 years of partying.
No, I think that also, you can't operate on such high frequency with the different substances. And I think your body needs to regulate.
Yeah. So to this day, I will never know what it was. Yeah. But all I know is I had it for a year and I've never yet again had it, which is crazy, because obviously if someone has a mental health disorder, it's very rare that like you just have it once and it's done. Yeah. But honestly, for me, it was a one and done, and hopefully I'll never have it again, touch wood. But I think the main takeaway from that was that for me, that mental health condition was manifested itself very physically, which means that it was very confusing because mentally I was fine. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel anxious. I was very happy, literally living like the best year of my life. But physically, my body was like dying on me.
Mm-hmm. I think also what you said about the birth control, I just don't know enough about it, so I can't speak to it. But I do think there have been like studies that talk about how that affects mental health. But it's just not like on the packaging. So how would we know? I think also like triggers for anxiousness, I really notice like, I feel really triggered when I don't feel safe. And that is like the word that I've like kind of been able to like embody as to like my most like anxious moments. So how I kind of like deal with my anxiousness on a day-to-day basis is I actively choose to not put myself in situations where I would not feel safe. And that can be like with my environment, places I go, people I hang out with, dating.
That's really good that you can recognize some of your triggers.
And I have felt, I'd say in like the last 2 years, I've really been able to like get it under control. I feel anxious talking about it.
I'm like, Jesus. So now after having cried and getting anxious talking about anxiety, let's talk about, because we both have this. We both have OCD.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but for me, my OCD is also very different in the sense that it's all inside my head. And this is the OCD, honestly, I didn't even know I had it. Like, it only took a diagnosis like a couple years ago when I started therapy. And I also don't think that it was very strong when I was younger. I think it's only gotten stronger as I've aged. Yeah. And it's very different because it's more to do with intrusive thoughts and thought patterns and control. I'm very type A. People call me a control freak. I mean, only one, my wife. And my mother, actually. I think my mother thinks I'm a control freak too. And I accept that because I see how my behaviors day to day like kind of mirror that. I think I have a very, very big issue with like having control and like needing control. And whenever there's times in life when I don't feel like I have control, like I get kind of like angry and irritable and like stressed and anxious. And so I do everything in my life to try and have control, but obviously that's not realistic. Like the best thing you can do in life is realize you have control over nothing apart from your own agency. But even then, like, you're so limited. So at least I recognize it. I'm trying really hard to, you know, sort of monitor my thoughts and monitor how it affects others, because I think that's the worst, is when your mental health condition affects others, right?
What do you think you're doing to feel like you're less in control or to like release control?
When, like, for example, something I've planned meticulously doesn't go to plan, and then I like obviously spiral.
Yeah.
And I think in those moments, because here's the thing, before therapy and before my wife like kind of showing me that, I didn't even have the awareness that I was like that, that was my OCD. Like, it took a diagnosis and then also like being with someone who's like a mirror to me of like, no, like, this is why you do this. Now at least I have the awareness, which I think is like the first step into being like, okay, this is my OCD.
Yeah.
Getting obsessed over things, over, you know, like, just it's
limerence.
Yeah. Not ready to go there, but one day. Just really mental OCD stuff. It's never outward. I would love it if my OCD was outward. Like, I would love it if I went around fucking, you know, turning plugs off and shutting doors. Like, that would be great. Actually, no, I joke. That's not great. But it's all mental, and it's very, like, it's intrusive thoughts. Like, a lot of my OCD is thinking about bad stuff happening all the time.
Yeah.
Which is so bad. It's obviously toxic.
It feels like a prison for your brain.
Yeah.
I have not been diagnosed with OCD, but I mean, it's quite obvious to me that I have it. I think for me, my like only rebuttal is, I think when you're like a strong, confident woman that's extroverted, and you have more of a dominating personality, you tend to be more controlling.
Mm-hmm.
I think like ever since I was a little kid, like my personality has definitely not been one that is submissive. So I think when you have a loud voice and you're dominant, you tend to be more controlling, because I think for me, I've always like been like, well, I don't want to say like my way is the right way, but like when I look at like all the different avenues, I'm like, okay, well, if it's executed this way, this will happen, which obviously is unfair.
And I think we're very similar in that.
Yeah.
We always say like, well,
Yeah.
if we just did things, they'd go
Yeah.
right. Because
I have like a process brain, and I like to like follow steps to get it done.
And this is where I also struggle with the OCD, because, and I always kind of talk to my wife about it, where I'm like, but sometimes the OCD and the control and the type A-ness is my superpower, because I can use that to my benefit. And so sometimes I'm like, is this the OCD, or is it just me being like type A and an only child? Because also that's the other thing. It's like, I was an only child for 20 years. And a lot of it comes with like, you're independent, you have control, you live your life a certain way, and you don't like to kind of deflect from that. So also it's recognizing when, and I think for me, the switch of recognizing is, does it affect someone else's life negatively?
Yeah.
Because if it's, you know, if it's something that you're type A and it's working to your benefit, great. But if you're starting to do things that's now affecting other people and not in a good way, that's when I think you have to kind of check yourself.
I think in relationships, I tend to be like a little bit decision fatigue, and I usually am not trying to be controlling. I'm like, you guys can figure this shit out. Like, I don't need to like control the situation. But behind the scenes in my like personal life, day to day, I would say I am. I mean, my mom would be like, yes, you're so controlling. But when I've had a partner, I don't think any boyfriend or man I've dated would say I was controlling.
Yeah, I'm the opposite, where I think a lot of issues in my relationships have come from me wanting to take control too much and lead too much. And then I'll complain that I'm doing everything. And they're like, bitch, you wanted to do everything. And now you're complaining that you do everything.
Do you think, though, you tend to have dated more like lackadaisical personalities?
Yes, because I think you need to date someone that complements you. It's actually like there is this Harvard professor that I love called Arthur Brooks, and he talks a lot about happiness and love and relationships. And he talks a lot about how like the best thing in relationships and like the metric of success is finding someone complementary to you. So if anyone knows my wife, we are like night and day, yin and yang. Like, we are so different, and that's why we work, is because we are so different. And actually it is the root of a lot of frustration, because we look at each other and we're like, how are you not thinking the same as me? But from a practical standpoint, you know, we've got all bases covered because we are so different. And that's also why I've been able to grow so much as a human, because she has given me traits or given me the clarity and the self-awareness of things that either, you know, I should sustain, or things I actually should change for my own sanity. That has been life-changing. I think that if I was with someone like me, it would be fucking kryptonite. Like, it would be disastrous.
Yeah, like blow up.
Horrible.
What about like ADD or ADHD?
Do you have ADHD?
No.
Oh, that's good. Again, that's a new diagnosis for me, and it came along with the OCD diagnosis through therapy. I think my ADHD has been more of a benefit to me than a hindrance. And for the longest time, I didn't know I had ADHD, because my ADHD has been more about like overachieving and overperforming, but then really fucking struggling to do it. So for like a practical example is at university or at school, I used to get really good grades, but to do an essay or to do a piece of work, I would literally be in the library for 3 days straight, and for every hour of typing I would need like 3 hours of procrastinating. And I just didn't understand how people would just sit there for like hours and just get their essay done and then go home. Like, it would be so painful for me to do it, and I just didn't understand why my brain couldn't focus. Granted, I now know that a lot of those people were on like stimulants and like you know, study drugs, Adderall and stuff, which I probably would have benefited from. I didn't know that at the time, though. I didn't know that I didn't know ADHD was a thing.
Yeah.
Even though I literally did psychology at university. But I think I was just so focused on all the other disorders in the DSM that I didn't focus on ADHD, and I didn't even know I had it. But all I know is my whole life, I was like an overachiever, loved getting good grades, but it was kind of harder to me. I also think like intelligence, obviously part of intelligence is inherited. And like my mum is super intelligent, and like all the people in her life tell me your mum was always the person that like did no work and got like the top grades. So I think I've kind of inherited her intellect, but then the difference is that I have to work for it, and I find it really, 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 really hard working for it. It just takes me a lot of energy. So it's not been easy but to focus with my ADHD, and only now do I know that I have it. But I've also chosen not to self-medicate. Like I have Adderall, I don't take it just because that I don't want to be dependent on something. Also, I don't do well on like a lot of stimulants. Like I feel like I'm having a heart attack. Like I feel like I've just done too much of something.
Yeah. In love with the cocoa.
Yeah, like it doesn't make me feel good. But I think I just use it to my superpower. I think, if I could change anything about it, it would be, I wish I didn't work. I worked just as well not under pressure as I do under pressure. I wish I didn't leave things to the last minute. I wish that I could, do things without having to multitask. Like literally the minute I open an email to reply to someone, I'll type a line and then open something else, start on something else, open something else. Like I can't not do things without multitasking.
I think like back to the Adderall too that you were just saying, like your choice to not take it and not want to be dependent on stimulants. I'm not educated enough in this space, so I can't speak to it. Mm-hmm. I do think what's so wonderful about the conversation and topics surrounding mental health, and that like you would even just like share your story dealing with ADHD, being prescribed Adderall, how it affects you in your personal and professional life. Like even just what you said right there, no one was talking about that until quite recently. And I think it's extremely relatable. And I think it's confusing as an adult when you get the opportunity to decide, like, do I want to take Adderall? Because as a kid, right, your parents are like, oh, take this, take that. And then I think you get to like this place where we can all decide like what we want to put in our bodies.
Right.
And then I think that also can become overwhelming, because I do think sometimes you can be too quickly diagnosed with something and then you can become dependent on something and maybe you didn't need it. I think the times that I was the most anxious in my life, I was being affected by external factors that are no longer in my life anymore, and I'm doing fucking amazing.
Right. Yeah. And to that point, I also wonder, because for example, like my little brother has ADHD and I think he takes stuff for it. I'm not sure, but I also wonder how much of my ADHD has been exacerbated by social media and like us being constantly glued to technology because of our work. Like that shit is not normal. Mm-hmm. Like we were made to hunt for meat or like as women like wait for our husbands and take care of kids. But now we're like sending silly little emails for like crazy. 16 hours a day.
Staring at the screen.
Like it's just not normal.
Yeah.
So I also wonder like how much of it is genetic. And I do believe I'm like a huge behavioral genetics person. I hugely believe in it. And I wonder how much of it is genetic, but how much of it has just been exacerbated by like the crazy world we now live in. But I also, to your point on the drugs, like I am someone who, unlike a lot of people in my life and even you, like I'm not the biggest naturopath. Like I do believe in Western medicine, and I think that there is a lot of bad things about it. Like I think like, especially in the USA where it is more about kind of money making and prescribing people with shit that they might not need. I also do respect that sometimes someone's life could be changed just by like taking a drug and for the better. Like I suffer with migraines. Don't worry guys, it's not another mental health condition. And it's like I couldn't live a normal life if I didn't take my medicine for it. Like so I do respect that, I don't think there should be any stigma around antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication or medication for ADHD. Mm-hmm. I think people should just live their life and their prerogative and do what's best for them with medical advice. Yeah. I think, you know, it should be normalized and talked about, even though I have clearly chosen not to go down that path.
I think the key takeaway for me talking about mental health is like just normalizing the conversation. And I think when someone speaks about being depressed, it's like, let's just have like an open avenue to talk about it and figure out like what the correct like fix is, and not to say like you need to be fixed, because like being sad is also very normal and very okay.
On that point though, how much of the conversation that, because here's what I think, and maybe people might disagree with this, but I also think that we have started to over pathologize everything. So like you might be having a sad day and you might be like, oh, I'm depressed, but you're not actually depressed. And I've seen people online be like, oh, he's a narcissist, but maybe he's not a narcissist, he's just like a bit mean. Like I think there's also like some care needed around language, and I think we need to be very, very precise about mental health disorders and really give people the respect if they do suffer with something. Not everyone is depressed, not everyone is anxious, not everyone is a narcissist. And I think like really understanding like what that disorder is and how it kind of manifests. Yes.
Yeah, because I completely agree with that. I find it like really uneducated and cringy and like quite eye rolly. I'd add this to my like ick list and aversion list, is like people talking about mental health in a way that makes it like not feel valued, like saying like, oh, I have mental health. It's like, it's actually like not funny to me. And then I think it can make people who are actually going through something either not get the right care or not want to pursue it.
Correct. Like I think that we're either over treating things or under treating things. If like everyone, I think like having being really careful around the language that we use, and not everything is a mental health disorder, quite honestly. But on that note, normalizing therapy also I think is so important. I love therapy, and trust me when I say I didn't always love therapy, because when I had that anxiety issue when I was in my 20s, my mother sent me to therapy and I hated it. Like I think I just went to bad therapists, or I didn't have like I just maybe wasn't ready. Like I just didn't know what I was supposed to talk about, because also I was fine, I thought so. And I was but now in like my later 20s going into my 30s, I've done therapy. I've done couples therapy, which has been fucking amazing, and I would just recommend it to everyone. However, I will caveat that by saying that if you feel like you're in therapy, but therapy is only making you think about that thing that's wrong with you over and over and over again, and it's just a feedback loop for your problems, then really like assess how you can dial it down.
I am a big advocate for therapy. I think something that pisses me off is when you have a problem and you go to your friends and your friends give you advice. 90% of the time, the advice your friend is giving you is not the advice they would take. So it's really important to take it with a grain of salt. And sometimes I think we get too reliant on going to our friends for help or aid, and they're not therapists and they can only help you. Sometimes your friend wants to say what you want to hear. They don't want to hurt your feelings. So I'm always like, I love debriefing with friends, but I've really kind of not like, I just think like, sometimes when I'm helping a friend out, am I actually going to do what I'm saying? No, you know? So that's one thing. Second of all, I just think like when you go and see a therapist, finding the right therapist is really important. It's like dating. You have to find the right match. But I also admittedly like haven't been actively using my therapist because I was kind of tiresome of just talking about the same thing. And I was kind of like, you know what, Devon, either fucking do it or fucking don't. Otherwise, you're boring as fuck. And I cannot talk about the same thing and just be a boring person. Because to me, I'm like, the biggest diss that somebody could say about me is that I was boring.
I also stopped therapy because of that, because I was talking about the same thing over and over again. And I would just be yapping away. In fact, it got to the point where I was like, this bitch needs to be paying me because my stories are iconic.
Yes. No, I feel like that. I am like serving a reality show.
Yes. I'm like, she needs to be paying me. My stories are iconic. But I'm talking about the same thing over and over again, week on week. I don't give her space to tell me anything. It's just like an outlet.
Trauma dumping it.
Yeah, so that's why I stopped for a bit, because I was like, this is a feedback loop. And that's when I realized I need to stop and start again when I'm ready to like diversify the topics a little bit more.
One thing I would say, when I was actively in therapy, some weeks I'd feel like, oh, I don't have anything to talk about. And those are the weeks that I had the best insight, when there wasn't like a drama or something in my life that I felt confused about. It was just like when my therapist would be like, how are you? And in those moments, I feel like I got the most learnings and the most clarity.
I love that, because I've had weeks verbatim where my therapist is like, how are you? And I'm like, everything's fine and I have nothing to talk about this week. So like, what's the point? And then she's like, okay, let's talk about your childhood. And I'm like, no. Like, everything was fine. I had a great childhood. Like, I don't think we need to spend my money or time on this. And then 2 minutes later, I'm bawling.
No, it's true. That's why, like, for a lot of men, I think like it would be great if they were seeing a therapist, because sometimes you don't need to have like some crazy chaos in your life to break it down. I think it's just having an outside resource be able to speak to you from a third party.
Don't you think if the rate of men that went to therapy matched women, the world would just be such a better place?
If I'm on a date with a man and he's in therapy, I'm wet.
Green flag.
I am like, yes, baby.
Come to bed. Come to mama. One analogy that my mom, sorry, I don't know why that made me think of mom.
Poor mom.
Sorry, mom. But I did just think of an analogy that my mom's very pro therapy. And she always said to me when I was kind of, a bit argumentative about therapy, which was also ironic because it was during the time that I was a literal psychology student for my undergraduate. I did psychology, that I was like, I don't want to go to therapy. I hate this.
Yeah.
But she always had this analogy which always stuck to me, which is like, when soldiers go to war, they don't just get up from bed and are like ready to like fight. You know, they don't just wake up with the skills. They have been preparing. They have been training. They have been, doing exercises, which is the same with therapy. It's like when shit goes down in your life and someone dies or you get an illness or, shit hits the fan, you don't just wake up with the skills to deal with that.
Correct.
You've had to like prepare for it, and you've had to practice, and you've had to really adopt the right mindset to wake up and like fight that. And that always stuck to me, because I do try and see therapy now as like, even on the weeks where I have nothing to talk about, it's like, how can I, leverage this and gain skills to deal with what's to come that I don't even know what that is yet.
Yeah. I absolutely love that example, and it just makes so much sense, and I think it breaks it down. This is a different topic, but I just think also therapy is so expensive, and that is what is a bummer to me. Is I do feel like I've had times where friends have reached out and been like, do you have a good therapist? I really need someone. And I'm like, yeah, I have an amazing therapist, but she doesn't take healthcare and she's X amount.
That's the same as mine. So I was doing mine for literal 5 years, since 2019, and I stopped for a bit last year because she's like $230 per session, and I was doing it every week. So that's like $1,000 a month in therapy.
It's a lot.
But I didn't want to change therapists because she knew me, and I didn't want to go and tell everyone. So I kind of just dip in and out depending on my financial situation.
No, but I think that's a reality. I've felt like that a lot.
And I've heard that the resources that are acceptable, like BetterHelp and stuff, like I haven't heard amazing stories, to be quite honest.
Either.
But I mean, that obviously with health insurance you can probably get good therapists, but still it's the ones that are expensive that are like really good, and it's a shame that it's not accessible.
Yeah.
With the topic of therapy, do you think there's anything you can do without therapy? Like, okay, self-care, that's obviously like such a big hit word online. What do you think about self-care and the things you can do outside of therapy, whether that's meditation, but obviously we all know we don't meditate, that really helps your mental health?
So I'm a little bit eye-rolly on the self-care girly movement. I'm not really into that. I think like taking a 1-hour bath would like prune my hands and just like not cure me. just like not doing
Yeah,
that.
I agree.
So I think like that can also just be like a little bit toxic. I am obviously really into walking. So I think for me, getting out in nature, like grounding without shoes, going to the beach, for me, walking has been like a really, really, really big, like important part, I'd say. One thing though, I've been just like very, I'm trying to think of the word. I notice that when I'm really anxious, I'll go on long walks, which actually is worse for the anxiety because then I'm in my head and then walking becomes like a punishment and then identified with being anxious. So other things I try to do is like call a friend. I will like cook or bake. For me, like putting on a show is not distracting. Like that's never worked for me. But I think usually getting out in nature and just like feeling the sun or like the wind on your face.
Yeah,
Does that sound silly?
No. I think and this is also my beef with the self-care discussion, because I think it's like normal things you should do anyway that people are like self-care. I'm like, taking a bath isn't fucking self-care.
No.
It's just a normal thing that people should do.
Yes.
For like just
agreed.
And I think sometimes I don't even know what self-care is because I don't engage.
Like the self-care girlies are like, do a face mask and then order Postmates and get cozy under a blanket. I'm like, oh.
Isn't that what we do?
Yeah,
anyway?
I do that every night.
Damn, I'm self-caring every day. I don't think I've even ever thought about self-care. Like, what do I do if I want to like treat myself? Have sex?
Probably sex, or like, I mean, I love getting like a gorgeous facial and drinking like a ginger tea, but also I just do that anyways.
But that's what I mean. I have never thought of an activity in my life as I'm like, oh, I'm doing self-care.
Okay, wait, this is actually really good for us to think about. I think self-care for me would be going to a pool on a really hot day with like a trashy magazine, a margarita, and just like soaking up the UV. And just like that to me would feel like self-care.
Yeah.
Like, is that?
Well, because here's the thing. Like, sometimes I think self-care sounds like a guilty pleasure, but there is nothing I do in my life that I feel bad about. Like, I think everything I do, I'm like, this is just normal. Like, people should do this.
Honestly, I think I feel that way too. I've never thought about this.
Okay, so we hate self-care.
Yeah.
If you're suffering with a mental health condition, don't adhere to self-care.
Don't read our chapter in our books called self-care.
Yeah, I think we have to kind of think about this one a little bit more.
Yeah, let's think. I want to be thoughtful to it.
Yeah.
I just like am racking my brain right now, and like the fact that I came up with like laying at a pool with a trashy read is not.
Wait until we get to the body positivity movement. You guys will love that episode. Last point that I want to touch on before we wrap up this episode is how, as I said, I no longer suffer with anxiety. But one thing that I have noticed in my life, and I'm sure everyone can relate to this, is the doom scrolling and how social media and watching the news, especially in the moment we are in nowadays, is insanely toxic for our mental health. It is not normal to open your Instagram and see, because that literally has happened to me. Like, I literally woke up at 8 a.m. last year, and so I don't think it's normal. I don't think it's good for us. But here's the thing. I always think about this, always. I wish I could live a life where I don't have social media and I just live, away from all the stimulation that isn't good for our mental health. But I can't. It's my job. And I have to be connected to people. I have to be connected to my profession. So it's like, what can we do if that is not an option? Unlike my wife, who doesn't have social media, and that is great for her. And she has a much better mental health than me.
Yeah. I think when we were at Playboy and I was launching Playboy Lingerie, all I looked at for like 4 months was hot girls in lingerie. And I'd say during that time, my mental health really struggled because I was basically like comparing myself to like hundreds of hot women per day for 4 months straight. And then that was the only content I could consume. So naturally, I'm like picking myself apart. So I think from that time in my life, what I do on Instagram or social to be hyper aware of that is I remind myself that like literally it's a facade. Also, like, how many times have you been down bad and then you post like a hot photo? Like when I was
The
literally
dopamine.
ill with the flu last week, throwing up, I posted a hot selfie of myself. So it's just like I think I have a really good grip on it in my life right now where I'm just like, this is fake. This is a facade. I think it's so much fun, but I try to be like really conscientious. I also think with like the example that you gave that's like so sick and disturbing that I can't even repeat it because it's just so heart-wrenching. I think it's such a sad time because there's no way that you can engage such negative news on repeat and not feel downtrodden and fearful.
Yeah. And to your point as well of like, I remember you even deleted Instagram.
Yeah, I had to. Because I was
Yeah.
like, this is becoming like fucking crazy. Like I wanted to get a boob job. Like
Yeah.
I was like so affected.
To your point on this comparison thing, like, I think more about it in the way of like comparing lives of, you know, like not in like a physical way, but of like seeing people achieve way more than me. Like the like Forbes 30 and the 30 thing. I'm like, should I have a Forbes 30 and the 30?
Course.
And that's not normal. Like that just isn't normal. And also to depend on social media, to give you that dopamine hit every day.
Yes.
Whether it's through likes, whether it's through, you know, people sending you messages, and the algorithm obviously knows how to give you that dopamine hit.
Yeah.
It's not good for us, but yet here we are, and we have to be kind of in the game that we don't want to play, but we're forced into it.
Yeah. I always wonder, like, is it just going to implode one day and it's just going to go away or something?
I mean, I think there will be times in our lives where there will be massive changes like we had with COVID, where not that this relates to social media, but it relates to kind of life changes of that certainly changed the way we work. You know, now we don't have to go to an office.
That's a great example.
That was unheard of before. I think there might be changes coming up that we can't think of that will definitely impact. I mean, look, the social media thing, it's already legislative in the way that, you know, 16-year-olds in Australia now can't have social media until they're 16. Like, I think there's going to be more legislation, and I think it's going to impact society more. But I don't know what it will take for us to, especially now with AI, where like we're going to outsource intelligence, we're going to outsource so many things. People are literally going to be so different. Like humans will just be so much more different than everything we've known.
Yeah.
Stay sane.
I'm like, should we listen to that song that's like by Anxiety? But how does it go?
Anxiety.
People watching me. Maybe we'll do that dance thing.
Yeah.
I really don't want to do that.
I do want to finish this episode by saying that ultimately I'm quite a happy person. So even in moments of, well, actually I don't even have anxiety anymore. I think I get sad, I get angry, I get very controlling. I have ADHD, I have OCD.
It's just like living, baby.
It's
like
life.
It's life. I think it's so like when we were talking about this, I was just like, you know what? This is just life, and like we're all just navigating the ups and downs and like the different nuances of like the shit that gets thrown at us, and like we're all just doing the best that we can.
And isn't it such a blessing to feel those emotions?
Oh yeah, it is. I'm like really grateful.
Yeah, because like if you never felt sad, if you never felt angry, like you wouldn't appreciate the joy and the happy moments.
When it's really good.
But I do have a question for you before we finish this.
Talk to me.
Talk dirty to me. So I'm going to read it verbatim because it's a lengthy one.
Okay.
Do you think that our culture's obsession with mental health allows people to have an out for their bad behavior? For example, instead of facing the hard facts, people will just say, I just need to work on myself.
I do. I resonate very deeply with this question because I think the negative side of being so open to talking about mental health is that sometimes if you don't want to actually dig deep and deal with what's going on, you can shut somebody down by saying like, I'm just going through a lot. Like I had this happen to me. I'm having mental health. And, you know, maybe I'm personalizing this because this has happened to me a few times with people, but I really think it's like a disservice to use it as almost like a crutch to not have to like actually evolve or like actually dig deep and figure out like what is going on, to just like shut down and be like, I'm just going through a lot, mental health.
Like they'll just use it as an excuse for
Yes.
and Devon, I struggle with this so much, not personally, but for example, I have friends who have depression, and like because of that,
Yes.
they do things or have done things or act in a way where I'm like, they're not being a great friend. But then I'm like, how much of it should I excuse because they're in a bad place? I have to be supportive. I have to give them like an olive branch and be like, we're good, you know, like you're going through. But then if that is consistent and doesn't change, then it's like, okay, well now you're just a depressive person that's never going to be a good friend.
Yes.
Like I don't know where
the
line is of the balance of like how much should I excuse someone, you know?
Yeah, and like taking accountability. I don't have an answer for it, but I do think it's something to be cognizant of. Just because I've had it happen quite a few times in my life from others, and it's been really frustrating for me.
Yeah.
Okay, my question for you. So, what is your stance on, obviously we talked about prescription medication, and then we've also talked about like more of like a homeopath, like naturopath way of like dealing with mental health. Like, do you think there's a world that can exist where you can do both?
Personally, I think for me what has worked is both. I think that, as I mentioned, and again, I'm not an expert, I'm not a medical professional, like I just think what has worked for me is a combination of both, and I think we should be normalizing both therapies. And I am pro Western medicine, even though I think like maybe 70% of it is not good because of its capitalist endeavors. But I just wouldn't want anyone to feel ashamed for whether they're doing therapy or taking an antidepressant. And I think you can be both. I think you can be pro holistic, and I think you can be pro medicinal. I think that's the beauty of it.
Yeah,
and I
agree.
think we'll get to a time where we'll have more answers than we already have now. Normalize mental health disorders. And
Love you.
Love you. That's a wrap.
I think it's a wrap.
Be happy, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.